Senator from Kentucky.
We have before us a resolution on containment of Iran. Now, I have voted for sanctions on Iran and don't think it's a good idea that Iran have nuclear weapons. However, I'm very concerned about this particular resolution. I think a vote for this resolution is a vote for the concept of preemptive war. I know of no other way to interpret this resolution. The resolution says that containment, the strategy of trying to prevent expansion or invasion of countries, will never be our policy with regard to Iran. While I think it unwise to announce that we will contain Iran, I do think it unwise to tell Iran, oh, it's fine to get a nuclear weapon, we'll contain you. I also think it's equally unwise to say we will never contain you. The reason I say this is that we woke up one day and Pakistan had nuclear weapons. We woke up one day and Russia had nuclear weapons, China and India and North Korea. Had we made the statement, the rash statement, that we will never contain any country that has nuclear weapons, what does that mean? I think that means that you've decided right now, before anything happens, you've decided that you will preemptively go to war. We've been at war for a decade now. We've been at war in Afghanistan, and I supported going to Afghanistan, but I'm ready to come home from Afghanistan. We were at war in Iraq for nearly 10 years. I'm glad we're coming home from Iraq, but I don't want to automatically commit our country to a war in Iran. So while I do think it's a mistake to say we won't contain them, I think it's also a mistake to say that we will contain them. It's a mistake to have a policy that is explicit one way or the other. President Reagan was once criticized and accused of having no foreign policy. He replied that it wasn't that he had no foreign policy, it was that he didn't care to share it with everyone. Because if you give everyone, your potential enemies or friends, if you say to every country, if you do X, I'll do X, or if you maybe do this, I'll do that, you're exposing exactly what your plans are, and that may not be the best strategy. In other words, foreign policy is an ever-shifting battleground, and there should be a certain strategic ambiguity to foreign policy. So when we announce to Iran or to the world that we will never, ever contain Iran, it's an announcement that the bombs will be dropping if we ever hear that they are a nuclear power. Now, I don't think we should say automatically we're willing to accept them as a nuclear power, but I don't think we should automatically say that there will be a preemptive war with Iran. Now, everybody's been bragging. They say, oh, everybody's in the Senate is for this. Well, everybody's not. I'm not for this. I may be alone on this. But interestingly, if you travel to Israel, there's a very spirited debate on this. Meir Dagan, who's the head of the Mossad, cares deeply about Israel, would not be, by anyone's imagination, accused of being a shrinking violet. He's done many things to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. He's worried about what happens the minute the bombs start dropping on Iran. Where do you think the next set of bombs come? They'll be on Tel Aviv. They won't be on the U.S., but if you live in Tel Aviv, you might have some concern over what happens and what does Iran do. The other thing about beginning a war is that historically our country, we have had defensive wars. Nobody messes with us, and I agree with that. You mess with the United States, there will be significant repercussions. We won't let you invade other countries, and we won't let you invade the United States. But the idea that we will have offensive war and not defensive war is a concept that is new in our history. Preemptive war, going to war and saying we will go to war to prevent you from doing certain activities, is a new concept in our lexicon of foreign policy. And I think it's a dangerous one. Announcing to the world, as this resolution does, that containment will never be our policy is unwise. It's a recipe for perpetual war. A country that vows to never contain an enemy is a country that vows to always preemptively attack. To rule out containment as a strategy or as a strategic and sometimes militarily active form of defense is to admit that we have become Orwellian. Yes, we have always been at war with East Asia. Or, yes, we have always been at war with Eurasia. It's an idea that we will always be perpetually at war. Now, I'm proud of being for a strong national defense. I'm proud of being for protecting our country. But I cannot accept a resolution that says we will completely get rid of the containment strategy that really was a strategy that kept us safe for 60 years during the most aggressive and dangerous war we've ever encountered, the Cold War. Soviet Union had 30,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach the United States and attack us and devastate our country. If we would have had this concept that we rule out the idea of containment, we would have had an awful and devastating and maybe cataclysmic war with Russia. Now, North Korea is more similar to Iran, a two-bit dictatorship that has trouble feeding their own people, has trouble having enough supplies of food and gasoline for their own people. There are similarities. But when North Korea announced that it had a nuclear weapon, did we immediately start dropping bombs? Did we say we won't contain them? We contained North Korea. And some would argue that the leadership of North Korea is equally as irrational as the leadership of Iran, if not more so. So we are able to contain a two-bit socialist, very small and unproductive country like North Korea. I see no reason why, if we had to, we couldn't contain Iran. Now, I'm not promoting that as a philosophy. We shouldn't be telling Iran we'll contain you. But for goodness sakes, we shouldn't be saying we will never contain you. The people who vote for this resolution, I think, are well-meaning, but I don't think they're thinking this through. And we've had this before. When the resolution came up for the Iraq War, many voted for it. And then some came back later and say, well, I voted for it before I voted against it. They wanted it both ways. Many come up to me now and say, I voted for the Iraq War, but it was a mistake. I voted for this concept of offensive war, of preemptive war, to stop Iraq from having weapons of mass destruction, but I made a mistake. I think the Iraq War was a mistake. I wasn't here, but I would have voted no. I fear that we're pushing on. Every month there has to be a new and more bellicose resolution to ensure that we will go to war and that at all costs we will go to war in Iran. I think it's a mistake. I think there should be some strategic ambiguity, meaning that you don't announce to your enemies exactly what you're going to do. You let them know firmly what your position is, but you don't announce to them your entire military strategy. To do so, to rule out a strategy that we had for 60 years that worked, that kept us in a very difficult and uneasy peace with the Soviet Union, does anybody here argue that we would have been much better if containment would not have been a strategy? If we would have said, absolutely to Russia, if you do this, we are going, the bombs will drop tomorrow. That scares me. But what scares me more is that so many members of this body are just jumping up and down to embrace each other in the bipartisan desire that we will not have containment as a strategy, that we absolutely will go to war if we wake up and Iran has nuclear weapons. You know what? The other day, Meir Dagan, the former head of the Mossad, said that you can't bomb nuclear knowledge out of the psyche. Nuclear knowledge, the knowledge to make nuclear weapons, is out there now, and it's in Iran. We'll not be able to stop that knowledge. We'll not be able to eradicate the knowledge of nuclear weapons. That's something to think about, because there may come a day, and this is the prelude to the next argument. The next argument we have on this floor will be one day when Iran announces, and I'm not for this, I think we should do everything. I voted for sanctions. I think we should do everything to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But my goodness, this is a huge mistake. And it may be unpopular for me at home to say this, but I will say it, and I will say it loudly. To rule out any kind of defensive strategy that doesn't include an offensive war is a huge mistake for the country. And I will vigorously oppose this amendment, and I hope that those who have glommed onto this resolution so quickly, because there is an incredible force behind this resolution. There's an incredible lobbying apparatus that says you've got to go on to this or else. I hope they'll reread this and reconsider. Think about the double and triple amputees that have come home to your town. Think about the soldiers who have committed suicide. Think about the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who are overseas now, and ask yourself, are we ready to send another 100 or 200,000 or 300,000 soldiers to Iran? I'm not asking that we do nothing. We just beefed up the sanctions a couple of months ago. But you know, there are other things to do besides saying we will always have to go to war. For example, who does Iran trade with? You know the reason why the sanctions probably won't ultimately work? Because Iran trades with China and Russia and India and Japan, and they're exempt from the sanctions. Or we say they have sanctions, but then we give them exemptions, and they sell all their oil somewhere else. We really don't have the power to shut Iran down through sanctions. If we were to convince somehow Russia and China to be on our side, we could have leverage, and I think Iran would listen. The sanctions have brought them back to the table. They are negotiating. I don't for 1 minute believe everything they say or think that they're trustworthy, but it's better than war to have negotiations, even with a fallible and perhaps deceitful partner sometimes, but it's still better than war. I think there is such an eagerness or such a lack of reluctance in this body to think through the issues of war, and that's how we get into this. We get into it because everybody wants to be stronger than the next guy. Everybody wants to be more bellicose than the next guy. Everybody wants to say, nobody pushes us around and we're not going to take it. But there are other ways. There are other ways, and we have to worry about and think about what ultimately are the repercussions. Our soldiers are not inanimate clay that we put on this master board of chess, this geopolitical chess game to move around. These are young men and women who live in your neighborhood, who live in the neighboring town. And when I think about war, when I think about this resolution, I don't think about empty black and white words on a page. I think about those young men and women and my commitment, my real and strong commitment that I'm not going to war without absolute provocation, without a threat to the national security, and for goodness sakes, without a debate over it. Now, the other side may say, this doesn't say anything about war. No, but it says some things that really are unwise, that we would rule out an entire form of defense strategy that we used for 60 years successfully to stay out of war. So I think it's a mistake to say that it's okay for Iran to be a nuclear country and we will contain them, but I think it's also a mistake to say we will never contain them. I have another amendment that's coming up this evening, and this is an amendment to place limitations on foreign aid. For the last hour or two, we've had a bit of the other side giving their response, and that's fine. You discover the truth by hearing the debate on both sides of this. But Senator Moynihan, who used to serve up here and who's deceased, once said, everybody has the right to their own opinion, but you don't have the right to make up your own set of facts. So there was a senator here earlier, and he said, oh, that guy from Kentucky, he doesn't believe in a strong national defense. He would slash national defense. So anybody who's against foreign aid is not for national defense. And this particular senator said he would gut defense and he would cut it by 16%. Well, that's just sort of making up your facts, and that's not fair. He's entitled to his opinion, but he's not entitled to make up the facts. I do have a budget that I put forward that balances the budget in 5 years. I also have a priority within that budget that I think the most important thing that our government does and that the Constitution mandates is a strong national defense. I think it's the most important thing we do in this country. And so in my budget, I'm able to cut a significant amount of spending, but I actually eliminate the military sequester. The military sequester was an automatic cut, and I do it by cutting out other spending, real cuts in spending, in the same year to reduce the size of government, but I don't have a 16% cut in military in 1 year. In fact, under the military sequester, I actually restore $50 billion that allows the first year not to have any cuts in military. Now, do I think there should be some cuts in military? Yes. But I make it a little bit easier on the cuts over time. And to say I'm proposing a 16% cut is just untrue. Now, others have said, yeah, the military sequester is so horrible and he's going to cut foreign aid and the country will be defenseless and the hordes will be over here. We got to fight them over there. There's a certain irony to this because half of these people, these senators who are caterwauling about this military sequester, guess what they won't tell you? They voted for the military sequester. I voted against the military sequester last year because I didn't think there was going to be enough cuts to really rescue us from this debt bomb that's ticking. But the people who voted for the military sequester are now up here accusing me of wanting to gut defense and all the military cuts, and they voted for the military sequester. Others have come to the floor and said, if you don't pay people to be your friend, if you don't give people military, if you don't give people foreign aid, that you're wanting to withdraw from the world, that you're going to withdraw into a little tiny shell, into a closet, and lock yourself in a fortress, and you're not going to engage the world. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I don't think, we don't give any foreign aid to England. Have we withdrawn from England? We don't give any foreign aid to anybody in Europe. Have we withdrawn from Europe? We're incredibly connected with Europe. We're incredibly connected with China, despite our differences. Incredibly connected with China. We don't have to give foreign aid to be connected with the world. We should trade with the world. That's the connection. The more you're interconnected through trade, the less likely you are to go to war. The other side also says that if we don't have foreign aid, we'll have war. Well, my goodness, has anybody been paying attention? We've had two pretty big wars for a decade. We're involved in the longest war in the history of our country. I don't see any evidence that foreign aid is preventing war. Now, some might say, but foreign aid is humanitarian and we want to help poor people. I see zero evidence that foreign aid is helping poor people. It's helping rich people in poor countries. I went through an hour's worth of this earlier, talking about how dictators are the ones stealing the money in Africa. Africans live on an average of $2 a day. They did 30 years ago, and they still do, because foreign aid doesn't get to the people. It's stolen by the dictators. The other point to make about foreign aid is they're all like, oh my goodness, if we don't have foreign aid, we'll be fighting them on our shores. Because we have foreign aid, we have a great deal of antipathy. What they need to think through, and nobody's thinking through, is why are the Arabs mad? Why are they yelling and screaming and burning the American flag? And it makes me mad. That's one reason I don't want to send them any money, is because they're burning our flag. But why are they mad? They're mad because Mubarak, who was a dictator in Egypt, do you know what he did when the crowds would form? He hosed them down with tear gas made in Pennsylvania, bought with foreign aid. When the police came with truncheons and beat the crap out of you if you were a protester in Egypt, they did it with money from the United States. They're not mad at us because we're rich. They're not mad at us because we drive cars and have nice clothes and have music that they find distasteful. They're really not even ultimately mad at us because of that movie. They don't like it, and I understand their sensibilities on this, but that's not ultimately why they're mad. You get really mad when you're hit over the head with a police truncheon paid for with foreign aid. So it's really exactly the opposite of what the other side says. The other side says without foreign aid, we'll have more war. I say because of the foreign aid, we have more war. There's no objective evidence. Is there any objective evidence that we've had less war with foreign aid? None. Zero. There is a lot of evidence we're out of money, though. We are $1 trillion in the hole every year, and they all come down, they pay lip service to it, but then they say, oh, well, $30 billion, that won't make a difference. If you don't start somewhere, you got to start somewhere. Foreign aid's a great place to start. These senators are disconnected from the public. The public, if you talk to them, and I defy any of them that are going to vote to continue foreign aid with no limitations, go home and ask your people. I'll bet you 90% of people at home, it routinely polls in the 70s, are in favor of not sending money overseas. Particularly if you say, do you want to send money overseas to people who despise us? Do you want to send money overseas to people who are burning our flag? Do you want to send money overseas to a country that has tortured a man that helped get bin Laden? To a country that allowed bin Laden to live within its midst for 6 or 7 years unmolested? To a country that's mad at us now because we got bin Laden? To a country where a third of them probably would vote for bin Laden for president? So I say, far from destabilizing the world, what would happen is, if we were to remove foreign aid, we would remove the impetus to the Arab Spring becoming the Arab Winter. What I see is people recognizing that people are angry, but I see no intelligent discussion about why they're angry. When people come to me and they say, it's because you're rich and you're a wealthy country, that doesn't make any sense to me. Many of these people actually in the Arab Spring really do want freedom, a freedom like our freedom. Maybe a little different. I mean, it's a different culture, and they believe in a different system of democracy than we do, but they still want some freedom. So you say, if they want freedom and we have freedom, why wouldn't they admire our system? Why wouldn't they be sympathetic? Why are they burning our flag? Why are 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people rallying and burning our flag? It's because too often our foreign aid has gone to support dictators who have oppressed their people. Mubarak got $60 billion in Egypt. His family is worth 20, 30, 40, some estimates of $50 billion. They repressed their people. You couldn't come into the street without being beaten over the head with a police baton or sprayed with tear gas made in Pennsylvania. They were mad at Mubarak, understandably so, and that anger is transferred to us. Same with Ben Ali in Tunisia. The same with Hussein. You will remember Hussein was our ally before he was our enemy. In the Iran-Iraq war, you had American planes on both sides. We had military advisors supporting Hussein against Iran, but we had F-4 Phantoms flying on Iran's side that were left in there when we left. This goes back a long way. I remember being in high school and being perplexed. Why do the Iranians hate us? Why were they burning our flag? Why were they burning our embassy and jumping up and down like a bunch of idiots, burning our flag? Why did they hate us so much? Because we kept in power a man, the Shah, who they didn't like, who they despised, and who was autocratic and had a very significant police force that didn't allow dissent. So really, it's the opposite of what the other side argues for. The other side is arguing that without foreign aid, we'll have war. I'm arguing that because of foreign aid, we have war. Because of foreign aid, and because of the misapplication of foreign aid, and because of the theft of foreign aid, and because foreign aid is given to people who repress their people, the Arab Spring, which has a healthy element to it, has become the Arab Winter. If we don't understand that, we're never going to get beyond that. But we have to also go back to the specifics of what I'm asking for in this amendment. In this amendment, what I am asking for is that there simply be restrictions. I'm asking that to get our foreign aid, you have to act like an ally. You have to significantly and believably pledge to protect our embassy. And with Libya's regard, you have to promise to turn over the people who assassinated our ambassador. I think that's the minimum of what we do. Frankly, I think we probably shouldn't be sending it at all. I think this is a first step in the right direction to say, for goodness sakes, if we're going to send it to people, at least send it to people who are acting like your allies. So when you see the American flag being burned in public by tens of thousands of the horde around our embassies around the world, you ask yourself, do you want to send good money after bad to that country? Do you really believe it's working? When you do, when you think about whether your money should go to African despots and dictators, you ask, is that money getting to poor people in Africa, or is foreign aid going to rich people in poor countries? That's the history of it. It's the history of repression. It's the history of human rights abuse. It's a history of theft and more corruption than you can ever imagine. I will probably lose this vote, but I fought long and hard. I fought for 6 weeks to get this vote, And we're going to have this vote at midnight. People aren't too happy with me now. But we're going to have the vote tonight at midnight, and I think it's an important vote. I think it's an important first step whether we win or lose, because every senator who votes on this tonight will have to go home, and they will have to engage their constituents and explain to their constituents why they're still willing to send money to countries that are burning the American flag, why they're still willing to send money to countries where there's ample evidence of corruption and theft, thievery, why they're still willing to send foreign aid to countries that are openly disdainful of us. Do you know the president of Afghanistan or senior advisors have said that if there's a war with Pakistan between the United States and Pakistan, they'll side with Pakistan? Pakistan senior advisors have said if there's a war with Iran, they'll side with Iran. These are the people we're still sending billions of dollars to, saying, please be our friends. They laugh at us. They snigger and turn away and say, fools. That's what they say to us. So I say what we need in this country is an American spring. An American spring where we wake up and say, look, to make our country great again, to retain American greatness, we have to figure out how to grow at home, and I think that means leaving more money at home. And I hope the Senate will consider this when they vote on these resolutions this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Iowa.